Two priests are going to Hawaii on a vacation and decide that they would make this a real vacation by not wearing anything that would identify them as clergy. As soon as the plane lands, they head for a store and buy some really outrageous shorts, shirts, sandals, and sunglasses. The next morning, they go to the beach, dressed in their tourist attire. They sit on beach chairs, enjoying a drink and the sunshine, when a gorgeous blonde, in a tiny bikini, comes walking straight towards them. They cannot help but stare. And when she passes them, she smiles and says, "Good morning, Father," addressing each of them individually. They both are stunned that somehow, she was able to recognize them as priests. The next day, they go back to the store and buy even more outrageous outfits. And again, they settle on the beach in their chairs to enjoy the sunshine. After a while, the same gorgeous blonde, wearing a string bikini this time, comes walking toward them. And again, she approaches them and greets them individually by saying, "Good morning, Father." As she starts to walk away, one of the priests jumps up and says, "Wait a minute, young lady. How in the world do you know that we are priests?" She smiles at him and replies, "Don't you recognize me, Father? I'm Sister Agnes." A very large old building was being torn down in Chicago to make a room for a new skyscraper. Due to its proximity to other buildings, it could not be imploded, so it had to be dismantled, floor by floor. While working on the 49th floor, two construction workers found a skeleton in a small closet behind the elevator shaft. They decided to call the police. When the police arrived, the workers directed them to the closet and showed them the skeleton. It was fully clothed and standing upright. The police thanked them and took the skeleton away. 2 days went by, and the construction workers couldn't stand it anymore. They had to know who they had found. They called the police and said, "We are the two guys who found the skeleton in the closet, and we want to know if you have identified who it belongs to." The police said that yes, they have. Desperate, the workers asked, "Well, who was it?" "The 1958 blonde, national hide-and-seek champion." A blonde sits down in a bar next to a redhead. Both of them are drinking and having a good time when the news comes on the TV. The woman reporter shouts out, "This just in. A man is at the edge of a cliff, attempting to jump." The redhead leans over to the blonde and whispers, "I bet you $50 that the man is gonna jump." The blonde responds, "You are on." So, both of the women stare at the news, waiting to find out what happens next. Finally, the man jumps. The blonde turns to the redhead and hands her the $50. Feeling guilty, the redhead says, "I can't really take your money. I saw the news earlier this morning. I knew he was going to jump off the cliff." The blonde says, "To be honest, I saw it too. I just never thought he would do it again." Two blondes meet in heaven and start discussing how they died. The first blonde says, "I died of a heart attack. My family had a long history of heart diseases, and I guess it was my time to go." The second blonde says, "Well, my story is far more interesting. I froze to death. It was definitely not the way I wanted to die, but that's what happened." The first blonde asks, "What is it like to freeze to death?" "It was cold at first, but then it became kinda peaceful." Willing to change the subject, she asks the first blonde, "What happened before you had a heart attack?" She says, "I knew my husband was cheating on me. So one day, I went home early, because I wanted to catch him in the act. He must have heard me pull into the driveway, and when I walked into the house, it was quiet. I quickly ran up to our bedroom, and found my husband in bed. I could see a glimpse of a bra underneath our bed. That definitely wasn't mine. So I immediately accused him of cheating, and I ran around the house, trying to find his girlfriend. I checked in every room, but could not find her. I was so upset that I had a heart attack that instantly killed me." The second blonde looked at her in disbelief and moaned, "If only you had looked in the freezer, we would both still be alive." A blonde is watching the news with her husband when the news presenter says, 6 Brazilian men die in a skydiving accident. The blonde starts crying uncontrollably and says to her husband, "Oh my God. That's horrible." Trying to comfort her, he replies, "Yes, honey, it is sad. But those men were skydiving, and there is always a risk involved in the kind of activities." After a few minutes, the blonde calms down a bit. She looks up at her husband and asks him, "How many is a Brazilian?" Three blondes find themselves stranded on an island. They discover an old oil lamp and release a genie. The genie says that they can each have one wish to get themselves off the island. The first blonde says, "I wish I was smart, so that I could figure out a way to get off the island." So she turns into a redhead and swims off the island. The second blonde thinks for a second and says, "I wish I was smarter than her." So she turns into a brunette and swims away. The third blonde thinks long and hard, and then says, "I wish I was smarter than both of them." And so she turns into a man and walks over the bridge. A young guy invites the blonde he likes to his apartment for a dinner. To prepare for his big date, he goes up onto the roof of his apartment building in order to tan himself. Not wanting any tan lines to show, he decides to sunbathe in the nude. Unfortunately, he falls asleep while on the roof and manages to sunburn his tool of the trade. He is determined not to miss his date, so he puts some lotion on his manhood and wraps it in gauze. The blonde shows up for the date at his apartment, and he treats her to a home-cooked dinner, after which they go into the living room to watch a movie. During the movie, however, his sunburn starts acting up again. He asks to be excused, and goes into the kitchen, where he pours a tall glass of cold milk, and places his sunburned member in there, to experience some relief from burning. At this very moment, the blonde decides to check on him, and walks into the kitchen. Upon seeing what he is doing, the blonde exclaims, "So that's how you guys load those things?"